like to introduce Miss Margaret Buzz here today, who is a talent acquisition manager and interview coach and trainer specializing in helping job seekers secure their dream roles, promotions, and higher compensation. Since 2006, Margaret has been successfully coaching thousands of individuals worldwide to achieve their career goals. Her insights and advice have been featured in prominent publications such as Fox Business, Business Insider, Forbes, and many more. Hi, Margaret, and welcome to the webinar. And the stage is all yours now.
Hi, Tripti. Thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you for everyone attending live. So let me just share my screen. We have 25 minutes. 1 second. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Just checking. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, I think people can see my screen. Great. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Mohammed. So, welcome everyone to this session on resume success blueprint. I will share some strategies, both for experienced individuals, but also for recent grads. It's going to take 20 to 25 minutes, and afterwards I'm going to join one of the networking rooms. So I'll be happy to answer any of your questions that don't get answered in this session today. So I won't do my introduction again because Tripti has done that, but I have worked in recruitment for 18 years, recruiting across many different countries, many different positions. I've recruited for all different corporate functions and a lot of technical positions. I've hired engineers all around the world. And yeah, happy to share some of my best CV resume tips on how you can actually make your resume stand out and also how to get more interviews in a competitive job market. So we'll look at some of the tips, resume tips for this year. I will share some very specific tips on how to quantify your achievements on your CV. I'm using CV and resume interchangeably. I think we mostly use CV in Europe, but at the same time, some people use resume. So I'm using that term interchangeably. And I will also share some examples of CV summary and CV samples. So firstly, in terms of resume tips for 2024, it's obviously a pretty competitive job market right now. I see that the job market is quite tough. I have clients, I have friends who used to get jobs very quickly, and right now they're struggling even to get an interview. So let me show you some tips on how you can actually increase your chances of being invited for an interview. So firstly, and that's super, super important, you want to be able to tailor your CV to every position. That doesn't mean that you need to change and have a different CV version for different positions. No, I mean, you might want to have two different versions if you're applying for two different types of jobs. But the CV customization I'm talking about is just literally about changing your CV summary section, perhaps reorganizing some bullet points, and perhaps changing or adapting your skills or core competency section. I will share some examples later. But in general, if there's something specific on the job description that you've done, you want to make it clear within seconds of recruiter or a hiring manager looking at your CV that you have the skills that they are looking for. So it could be as simple as adding one or two sentences to your CV summary section. It could be just changing the order of the skills or just reorganizing some bullet points on your CV. That can really increase your chances of getting an interview, and you don't have to spend too much time on that. I know there are different AI tools that will allow you to customize your CV, but honestly, you don't need to spend an hour customizing your CV. That's absolutely not needed. It shouldn't take more than a few minutes. You want to use a clear and professional format. You want to have a lot of white space, obviously no spelling and grammar mistakes. I think that's pretty obvious. And what I really recommend is to have a compelling summary. So objective only if you are a new graduate and you haven't got that experience yet. But in general, you want to be able to introduce yourself and highlight your career goals and qualifications. I will share some examples later, but that's the section I would actually recommend that you tailor to every single position that you are recruiting for. Another very important thing is to, and I will share examples of that soon, is that you highlight achievements and not just responsibilities. One of the biggest mistakes I see is that people, job seekers, they mention the responsibilities, they mention what they were, responsible for or duties included, but I can't really tell how good they are based on what they wrote on their CV. So you want to use action verbs and specific metrics to demonstrate your impact. So I would actually really recommend that you remove all of the responsible for and duties included, and action verbs could be managed, initiated, delivered, and then you want to use some metrics, and we'll cover that in a moment. You want to use specific keywords from the job description to ensure that your resume gets noticed. Now, in most companies I have recruited for, we recruiters would look at every single CV. So it's not necessarily that your CV will just get lost in this big black hole. I mean, that might happen maybe in some organizations, but in all of the ones I've recruited for, yes, we can use ATS to search for someone with a specific keywords. That's why it's important. But recruiters would actually look at every single CV. And of course, you want to include relevant work experience in a reverse chronological order. And if you have, extensive work experience, and maybe you're applying for a role, like let's say you've done one thing for many years, and then for the last 3 to 4 years, or the last whatever, how many years you've done actually something slightly different. You might just want to reorganize sections on your CV to emphasize the most relevant work experience, to ensure that the most relevant work experience still starts on page 1. And quantify your achievements. So that's super, super important. You want to be able to show them, demonstrate impact of your work. And that goes both for your CV and that goes for the interview. So you want to quantify your achievements with some kind of specific numbers or percentages to demonstrate the impact that you've made in previous positions. I will share some examples shortly. Ideally, you also want to use bullet points. I sometimes see CVs that have a lot of different, just like long paragraphs of text that's super hard to read. So just use bullet points. It's just easier. It makes it easier for hiring managers to scan your CV quickly. And you definitely want to have the relevant keywords. So that's part of the customization I was talking about earlier. So you want to include some industry-specific keywords and phrases throughout your CV to demonstrate that you have, that you have the skills that the job description mentions. And you want to provide specific examples. So don't just mention the really generic stuff, but you want to use some specific examples to illustrate your contributions. Again, we've talked about metrics, but maybe that's here again, but you can never, I can maybe emphasize that again, use metrics to demonstrate impact, because otherwise I see so many CVs that kind of just look the same. I can't tell how good you are by looking at you at that CV. So using some kind of metrics to demonstrate impact is very important. You want to be honest and authentic. If you lie about your qualifications and experience, that could really be quite easily checked, not just during background checks, but when you start interviewing someone and you lie, it's one thing to embellish something slightly, but which, I guess you shouldn't do that anyway, but that's one thing. But to actually lie about your experience, that should really come out during the interview process, because quite often you will speak to the candidate, and when you start asking them deeper probing questions, you will quite often know that this candidate hasn't really done that, or they haven't taken full ownership. And I put the last one, it's kind of a basic one, like include contact information, including your LinkedIn profile ideally. I actually recently spoke to someone and she messaged me and said, I'm not getting any interviews, and not sure what's happening. So she sent me her CV, and actually CV looked pretty good. I mean, there were some tweaks to be made, but in general, the CV looked good. She had 0 contact details on her CV, like literally 0, no email, no phone number, absolutely nothing, no LinkedIn profile. So again, maybe that's the main reason that you are not getting interviews. So how do you quantify your achievements? A lot of people really struggle with that, and I wanted to share some examples, but first I just wanted to briefly talk about what we are looking for as recruiters. What are we looking for on a resume, on a CV? So firstly, your most recent position, your most recent experience. Is your experience relevant to what I'm looking for? Like, have you done a similar job? Have you done the same role? And ideally, ideally, sometimes it matters which industry. So, it just depending on the position. For some roles, it doesn't matter. But for some jobs, maybe like in sales, it's actually important that you have relevant industry experience. Also, company recognition. Like, do I actually understand what kind of company you're working for? So like right now, I recruit for a SaaS company called Mixmax. And typically, when I hire people, we want someone who also has at least some SaaS experience, not necessarily in a current role, but someone who's worked in a SaaS company before. If you have worked for a company that maybe like no one has heard about, I've worked for companies like that as well. Have a little line, like one or two lines under the job description to explain, the industry, this kind of scope, like what the company is doing. We're also looking at the overall experience and the career progression, like, do the titles make sense? Like obviously, I don't know, a marketing director in a 5-people company versus a Fortune 500 company, that's a very different position with very different responsibilities. So even if you've had a little progression, like from sales associate to senior sales associate, you want to make sure that that's included on your CV. You want to have the relevant keywords. So what are typically the hard skills mentioned on the job description? You want to make sure that's on your CV as well. Overall organization. So as I mentioned, bullet points. You want to have a lot of white space. You want to make sure there are no grammar or spelling mistakes. I would really recommend to have no tables. Like there are a lot of these resume templates these days with like tables, and I actually don't think that works. And a lot of ATS, the ATS and the applicant tracking system, they don't actually recognize them, and then the formatting can get lost. So I would just, simple Word or PDF is absolutely fine, and yeah, no tables, no boxes on your CV. And the personal online footprint. So, I mean, ideally, you should have a link to your LinkedIn on your CV. If you're a graphic designer, you might have a link to your Behance. If you're an engineer, you might have a link to your GitHub profile. But in general, if you include something, most recruiters are most likely going to look. So just make sure that everything looks professional and you're not sharing anything that you wouldn't want, that you actually wouldn't really want to share. So here is just some information that will help you about how to list achievements, not just for the actual CV, but also for the interview. So when you think about, okay, which achievements can I list? Think about the time frame, the scale, and the results. So the time frame. So how long did it take? Like maybe you worked on a project that took 2 years. If it took 2 years, it's clearly more complex than something that took 2 weeks, right? I use one example here. So I've hired, that was one of my contracts at Box, and I've hired 25 employees within customer success team within 3 months contract, right? So that's a nice tangible result. Or like you can also talk about like specific, in terms of being specific, maybe you talk to 50 customers on a daily basis. Or maybe you're a social worker and you deal with 70 cases every single month. You also want to think about the scale. So, for example, maybe the size of the team managed, maybe the size of the budget, maybe the number of clients that you are managing or that you are working with. And then finally, you want to talk about the results. So ideally, you want to have some kind of metric. It doesn't have to be time saved or money saved, although that's always a good one. But even receiving a great feedback, completing a project on time, getting press coverage, all of that would be a really good result. And I wanted to share some. Actually, that's going to be the next slide. But in general, whenever you think about sharing your achievements, you want to answer the question that employer is asking in their head, like, how have you solved my problem? Or how can you improve my organization or my team? By outlining how you have done that for the current or the past employer. So instead of starting your CV with verbs like responsible for or duties included, you want to use action verbs like managed, implemented, delivered, right? Those kind of verbs. And you want to quantify your achievements with measurable components wherever possible. So here are also some different ways on how you can do that. So you can, in terms of quantifying your achievements, you can show how many. So for example, which sounds better? Ensured compliance with filing of annual forms. And that's, by the way, the type of a thing I normally see on a CV, like just responsibility, versus the example on the right, when you have some numbers, it's much more specific. So Obviously, the one on the right sounds a lot more impressive. You can also show like how much. So instead of saying that you save company money by finding ways to cut costs, you would use something that's more specific. And it doesn't have to be that number, by the way. It doesn't matter. It's just like, how can you quantify whatever that you've done, whatever it is that you've done. And you can also show how often. So even if you are in your like first role or you're working as an admin assistant, give some context. So instead of saying on your CV that you've answered phones at the front desk, which, maybe that's the job, that's fine. You could say manage switchboard with 10 incoming lines, effectively routing and receiving and routing an average of 500 calls per day. Which one sounds more impressive, right? So it's obviously the one on the right. And here are some examples, and I will share some examples for students as well. There's actually, in terms of these examples, there is a great article that I would recommend. Sorry, I actually didn't even have it here, but you can see it on the screen. There is, one second, let me just go back. Okay. There is a great article by Novo Resume, which has a lot of examples of quantifiable achievements. So you might just want to Google that. But here are some of the examples. So project manager, instead of saying managed projects or managed 5 projects, you can mention the number of projects, you can mention how much revenue the projects have generated, or you can just mention, like how many clients you've worked with during that time. Or example, from a data analyst, again, you see numbers, right? So might not be relevant to your role, but there will be always something that you can quantify. In fact, you can use ChatGPT to help you. So you can just go to ChatGPT, you can copy and paste your resume, and you can just ask ChatGPT, hi ChatGPT, how would you quantify my experience? And ChatGPT will give you ideas of how you can do that. Obviously, you still need to use your own common sense, because ChatGPT isn't always right, but it can help you. It will give you ideas of how you can actually quantify your experience. Some more examples here for a digital marketing manager. So, instead of just saying that you've worked on social media accounts of a specific company, you can say that you've improved user engagement by over 60%. The only thing is, like, don't make up those numbers, because when you go to an interview and you need to be able to explain everything, right? So like you don't need to quantify every single bullet point on your CV. That actually would be quite impossible, but just make sure that some of these bullet points are quantifiable. And as I said, don't lie. You have to be able to explain the story behind every single bullet point on your CV. Or like, software engineers. So maybe they've improved some procedures and guidelines, and that improves efficiency by 30%. And again, you need to be able to explain how you've measured that increased efficiency. So here are just some more examples. Or like, SEO specialists, instead of just saying that you've managed whichever company's SEO, mention some specifics, right? So maybe you grew traffic from 0 to 200,000, or you publish 10 articles per month, right? So be specific. That's what employers are looking for. Another like example from an engineering CV. So increase performance of the engineering team by 15%. Or like took eight active building projects from research to development to completion in under 2 years. So it's not always about like money saved, it's just it's just specifics. It's just some kind of, you want specificity. Or a financial analyst, right? Manage 5 different projects, and you can mention the budget. So what do you do if you don't have much experience? Maybe you're a student, maybe you're a new graduate, and you don't have that experience yet. I mean, firstly, if you've had any holiday jobs and part-time jobs during university, you can still mention what skills you've learned, right? So even if you let's say work as a waitress or a server, so you can mention how many tables you were serving per night, because at least it shows, I guess, just like the volume of work, the fact you're able to handle that. If you have any customer satisfaction notes, you might want to mention that. Or let's say you're a receptionist, so maybe you can mention how many appointments per week you've coordinated, or how many calls per week or per day that you've handled. So there's always a way that you can quantify something. And again, ChatGPT can definitely help you if you just like copy and paste your CV and ask ChatGPT, how can you quantify? Can you please help me quantify my achievements? They can suggest something, right? That will just, it will definitely help. Okay. And if you are a student, so you might just want to focus on your education. So I know that GPA is more an American term, but that doesn't matter. You might just want to mention like kind of what grades you got while working and studying full time. So you can, if you've had exceptional grades, you can mention education. Ideally, you want something more than just education. Projects. So any kind of projects that you worked on can come with achievements, maybe like marketing strategy that you've created for a class, maybe some kind of award, maybe a project got rewarded by something. So just think of any kind of project that you worked on when studying, and any kind of volunteer experience. So maybe you were teaching maths and you've improved student performance by 60% over one semester. So I know you won't always have those metrics, but typically when you focus on that, you will be able to find something. And finally, I wanted to share some CV, the actual CVs and the summary examples as well. So firstly, in general, this is a format I would recommend. So on top of your CV, you would have your name, your contact details. Now, you don't need to give your full address. You can just mention the city or city and a postcode, but you definitely want to have your mobile number, your email address, and ideally your LinkedIn as well. Targeted job title, that's not a must. It might make sense if you have maybe worked in like different positions and it's not clear from your CV that what kind of position you'll be really interested in. So like, let's say you've done different sales and marketing roles. Maybe it's not clear from your CV what you're looking for. Like, let's say you're now looking for a role in marketing, right? So you would mention a specific targeted job title, which hopefully will align with the jobs that you are applying for. Have a brief summary section. That's what I mentioned earlier. That's the summary section that you can tailor from like for every position you are applying for. And I will share some examples in a moment. But you just want to mention like, where do most of your achievements and expertise come from? Do you have specific industry experience? If you are maybe changing careers, you might want to mention what transferable skills you have, but also make it clear what kind of role you are looking for. Then the core competencies or a skill section. You don't always need to have that. You can sometimes just have the summary section or just this. Actually, no, I would always have a summary section, but you can also have a skill section, which you can tailor from role to role. So I wouldn't necessarily put soft skills there like, well, I would maybe put some of them up. I wouldn't put stuff like teamwork or communication skills, because that means kind of nothing. They're going to assess during the interview if you have those skills, but you want to pick some skills from the job description that you have, because that will also assist with that keyword optimization and scanning of your CV. And then when you list your work experience, as I mentioned, you don't want to have duties included, you don't want to have responsibilities, you want to have as many achievements as as possible, even if it's a couple of achievements per role, couple of things that you can quantify. So as you can see here, like, feel free to take a screenshot of that. So achievement 1, like for all the achievements that you craft, take a job description responsibility and ask yourself, like, how do you know that you did a good job? And then you describe what that good job looked like. You can also look at how you've saved money, made money, streamlined the process, positively contributed to the company culture, and you want to be specific. If you're still kind of struggling, think about like, what was your manager happy about, or your coworkers? Like, what do they come to you for? What did they praise you for? Because that can indicate what your specific unique talents are that employers should know about. Start each bullet point with an action verb, as I mentioned, and like each bullet point should be just a few lines. It should never be like a whole paragraph. So you want to keep it concise. Here's an example of a resume that's for an entry-level position of a recent graduate. And I know it's kind of hard to see, but it wasn't. Have a look at Google. If you're a new graduate, have a look at just Google entry-level or graduate example Business Insider. So Business Insider ran this series of articles, and they were maybe mostly aimed at like US, as you can see. They mention like the grades in the US, but it doesn't matter. The format is perfect, right? So you have a summary section. If you're a new graduate, obviously your education section would be at the front. If you're upfront if you are experienced professional. I would put the education section under the work experience section. But in general, this is a really good format. You have a summary section, and you would mention the skills that you have, the skills that you have that are listed on the job description. And even if you have limited work experience, then obviously one page CV will be absolutely fine. But even notice this person has only worked as an intern, and only for 3 months, but they still managed to be quite specific. So they assembled press kits for 8 clients. They mentioned who the clients were. They developed media kit list for 5 account managers. And they also handled over 75 client calls with the account management team, and they mentioned what these calls were. So you can see you can always be specific, even if you are doing an internship. So if you're a new graduate, just feel free to Google that, because that's just a really good format. So, and actually they have some other good examples on Business Insider. One is for a career changer. There's another one like experienced professional resume sample. So have a look. And Business Insider. Just Google that. You will be able to find that. And it's not just a resume; it actually explains why it's a good resume. So, these are articles I would definitely recommend. And here are just some examples. As I mentioned, you ideally want to have a CV summary section that's tailored to specific positions. So here are just some examples of CV summary sections. So let's say recent graduate seeking a job in banking. So again, feel free to take a screenshot of that. But you mentioned that you have hands-on internship experience. They're eager to leverage academic background and like some skills they're proficient in, right? Like, so they're proficient in, well, I guess proficient as much as you can be as an intern, but in financial modeling, risk assessment, or data analysis, right? So mention some of the skills that you can bring, even if your experience is quite limited. Here, a summary section for a finance manager. As you can see, just literally one paragraph. So they mentioned their background, they mention years of experience, which you don't necessarily need to mention the years of experience. But yeah, just like what's your expertise, right? So here is budgeting, forecasting, variance analysis. You also might want to mention, like, if your experience is in FMCG or in tech, you might want to emphasize that as well. Or a digital marketing manager. And again, you want to tailor that section to the position, but it's very clear what this person can do, right? They can drive successful online marketing campaigns. They have a track record of increasing brand awareness, lead generation, and revenue growth through strategic digital initiatives. They are skilled in SEO and SEM and social media marketing, email marketing, and content strategy. So like, that's like your unique value proposition, right? You would still need examples, specific examples in your work experience section, but that's just a really good example of a CV summary section. So that's the end of the session. Feel free to connect with me. I mean, on LinkedIn, you actually can't connect with me anymore because I've reached over 30,000 connections, but you can follow me, and I can follow you back. I have a YouTube channel with different videos as well. And and I'd be happy to answer any questions now. Do I just go to answer questions now, or because I can see there are some questions there?
Yeah, I think you can go backstage and take a table, and people can connect there with you, and maybe also network and get some answers from you.
Okay, perfect. So
Thank you so much, Margaret.
great. Yeah. So I know there are some questions here. Please feel free to come back backstage, and I will answer your questions. Okay.
Yeah.
So just
Guys,
come back
she's at
backstage.
the lounge area, so you can go and connect with her there. And thank you, Margaret, for your valuable and thoughtful words. I'm sure it has proven to be really, really helpful to our audience.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I will go back to the lounge, and I'll be happy to answer the questions. Yes.
Definitely. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.